So Call of Duty released their new feedback system called Recon Squad. And with the system, they are trying to create an invite-only community where they can uh, give people the opportunities to provide feedback through surveys, online community discussion boards, and potentially even invited to focus groups. And they do that in return for getting extra points in the Recon Squad for Call of Duty items or whatever. And it's powered by a company called Fuel Cycle. And so they released this, and people are pissed. There has been a lot of folks who are just downright angry that this exists. And when I read through the timeline and kind of looked at some of the things, one of the posts that stood out to me was Rara's post here, and he opens up with I can't believe COD is so dense that instead of hiring capable QA testers, they are trying to get free labor from players and mask it as some type of exclusive club. And this is not exclusive to Rara. This is actually I have seen this sentiment repeated probably 100 times in the last day or two, as people have come across this and they've read it and they thought about it. And I think at the end of the day, the problem is that this is a complete misunderstanding and a misinterpretation of what they are asking of us, what they are offering to us, I should say, and what they're actually doing, is doing a market research system, basically. And so this kind of stems from the problem of, whether or not Call of Duty actually listens to its community. And this has been a constant statement from people of all skill levels and all intensities in the game, is that a lot of folks do not feel listened to by Call of Duty, by Activision, in the decisions that Activision makes. And so Rara made a video. I'm not going to review the whole thing because it's 20 minutes long, and I'm trying to keep my videos shorter than 20 minutes because y'all complain, and that's fine. It's probably good to keep me from rambling, but I want to highlight this one section because I think Rara actually, through the criticism, he actually hits the nail on the head, but he doesn't realize it in what the problem is.
I want you to show me one streamer that was in the top, right? I'm not talking about 3 viewers. I'm talking about 100 viewers and more that was asking for Warzone to remove sprinting and plating, to remove sliding and slide cancels, to remove reloading and sprinting, to make it slower, to make it so that you only have 2 plates instead of 3, because those are all the changes that happened when we had Modern Warfare 2 or Warzone 2.0 drop.
Okay. Here is where I think a massive misunderstanding comes from with Call of Duty. It is a really common thought and statement and sentiment that Call of Duty listened to the wrong customers, the wrong players, when it created Call of Duty 2. And a lot of it comes from the way that they recreated that they recreated Warzone. And I've done videos on this, and I've talked about this on the podcast repeatedly. And the reality is that it's a complete misunderstanding in the mindset that was probably going on in Call of Duty when this happened. The answer is not that they listened to the wrong customers, the wrong players. It's that they didn't listen to the players at all. They didn't ask anybody what they thought. There was no information from the user base to Activision in terms of what Call of Duty 2 or Warzone 2 should look like. Okay. And the reality is, on a complete tangent, is that they probably expected BRs to be dead by now, and that extraction shooters were the future, and that's why it was a Tarkov extra light DMZ focused game. Okay. And the reality is that didn't pan out, and we ended up stuck with a Warzone that nobody wanted, and nobody had asked for. Okay. And the problem was, and we heard this from multiple creators who were invited to play the game early, who were invited to provide feedback early. And this comes from, honestly, all the way 2019. J God talks about it when he talks about 2019 and the red dots on the minimap. is nobody asked the players. Nobody actually asks the players what they want. They sit there and they look at their data, right? And they all have an entire department of data scientists whose job it is to look at the ones and zeros of the game and the aggregate of all of the players and their, and what their information, the recorded information says about whether they like the game or not. They don't ask the players. All right. They're not asking you and me whether or not they're making a good decision. They're making the decision and telling us about it later. And then if we really hate it enough, they stop, they revert the changes because people are screaming their heads off. Okay. And that's what happened to Warzone 2, right? They gave us Warzone 2. Everybody that they asked said we don't like it. No one's going to want to play this. And sure enough, it had one of the greatest fall-offs in Call of Duty history. It is ET level failure at the end of the day. Okay? What happens is companies that want to know what their customers want, they have to do market research. All right? They have to ask their customers. But you can't just ask your customer. You just can't ask random people, right? And this is something that a lot of people point to regularly. It's like, if you're asking people who don't know the game, who don't play the game, or they don't play modes of the game, right? If you ask someone who is a zombies only player questions about Warzone, their answers are not very useful, right? It doesn't matter, what they say about Warzone because they don't play Warzone. They're not familiar with Warzone. And the same thing with Warzone only players who don't buy the game, but they play Warzone every day. You ask them how they feel about multiplayer. And at the end of the day, it's like what they say doesn't matter, right? It's useless information from the point of view of trying to make decisions about what multiplayer should be. All right. And so the primary push, the thing that people are really upset about, myself included, is that Call of Duty seems to not listen to its core player base in any given mode, right? They just do what they want to do and they try and sell it to us later. And they've gotten away with it here and there when they've made a misstep and then they change it in the next game and they fix it going forward, right? They've done those things. And it's been fine, but lately, really from 2019 forward, with Warzone being the way that it is, this universal game, that they've never done before 2019, they have absolutely failed to understand what players want, right? And they live and they've told us this, right, in their white papers and in their blogs and on social media. They've described how everybody is, how everything is through their data. They look at their data and then make decisions. And the reality is, when you do that, you live in the ultimate echo chamber, right? Because data can tell you anything. What you need perspective on what the data means. And you also, you need to have good quality data, right? So we're all familiar with the pop-up. Sometimes it shows up, did you have fun in this game? And the reality is most people say, no, COD is dead. This game sucks. And they slam the, I hated this match. This match sucked button. And that, it makes the data useless, right? Because you don't know why they didn't like it. And so all they can do is look at the data. If they have a bunch of people from that match that said, we didn't like the match, and they go, oh, well, only 7% of people slide canceled. So slide canceling is obviously a problem. And that's how they've made decisions. That's how we got Warzone 2 at the end of the day. They looked at this data. They didn't really understand what customers were complaining about. They didn't understand where different issues collided to make the data say one thing and the reality was completely different. And so we have had Call of Duty making these blind, internally driven, and honestly, probably ego driven as well, because you'll have certain people that have decision-making authority that are stakeholders in the game, and they will make decisions based on their personal preferences. And they will see the world through that lens of like how they view the game and the game that they want to play versus the game that most people want to play. Okay. And you have all of these, and those people will skew the data or ignore the data completely to create the game that they're happy with. And so you end up with this system that doesn't make sense. Okay. And doesn't work and people aren't happy about it. So what does that mean? So Call of Duty has partnered with this company called Fuel Cycle. All right. And their objective is to make the data make sense. All right. So when you go to their site and you take a look at what they're doing, all right, they're looking at trying to find ways to verify the audience, right? So you don't want to take feedback from someone who doesn't play a mode, right? So if somebody only has 1 hour of playing BR and they are a Rebirth only player, you don't want to ask them about pacing in BR, right? You don't want to ask what they think the BR should do to have better pacing, because they're not a BR player. They're a Rebirth player. They're a Resurgence player. All right. So you have to be able to understand player. And this is where this system, because it's linked to Call of Duty, right? It's going to do profiling. It's going to pull information about the players that they either volunteer or that is publicly available according to their email address. You know, if that skeeves you out, that's totally legit. But this is the sort of stuff that this company will do and that every company does. Every company does this, all right? The fact that Activision hasn't been doing this shows in the product that we have. And what they're going to do is they're going to go through and they're going to understand the people that are giving the advice, okay? And when you do that in a controlled environment like this community, where you can link somebody's feedback to their account, to their play history, to their play style, to the modes that they play, you can understand why they're giving the feedback better than if you just looked at the data that they've had. All right. Fuel Cycle has a lot of information about it. They talk about how they go through, you know, all the different modes, ways they can gather data, surveys, discussion boards. You know, they can do focus groups, right? So you can sit there and, you know, you have a Zoom chat where everybody can talk about their issues and ask questions and have, you know, really back and forth information. And they can tie this, you know, they tie all the feedback back to their customer base, back to the individual people, so that they can validate that the information you're providing makes sense and is true, right? So, you know, one of the things that we have to do, and honestly, Rara hits this on his post. He says, you know, I'm sure people will totally give genuine feedback and not troll you, or better yet, you'll ask players who actually play 8 hours a day what the game needs, right? And he puts that as part of the criticism, which is actually not. It's what we need. We need people that play the game a lot to give their feedback, right? Like that's what we need at the end of the day. We need people who play the game and play the modes that they're talking about, right? Like if you only play Warzone and you only play the BR, right? Like you're a great person to ask what the BR needs. You're not a great person to ask what Zombies needs. Right? Don't ask me what Zombies needs, because I don't play Zombies. I don't care. Right? I have zero cares about Zombies. And so if you go to me and you say, what does Zombie needs? Well, make Zombies like Warzone, right? I'll play that. I played that last year. But that's not something that the zombie community wants, right? So if you look at my Zombies playtime over the last few years, you know, it's literally like a bunch of hours in Modern Warfare 3 and 0 hours anywhere else, right? So if you say, well, give me your feedback on round-based Zombies, I'm going to tell you, oh, it sucks because I don't play it and I don't want to play it. I'm not interested. And that's not good feedback, all right? But the reality is that's what Call of Duty has been doing, right? They just sit there and they say, they either blanket out either play tests or feedback questionnaires and these sort of things. They just send it out to everybody or a randomly selected group of people. They have no idea who's replying. They have no idea who you are. They have no idea if you actually are lying through your teeth, right? They have no clue. And they take that data and they overlay that over the play data that they have, and they try and make decisions in the boardroom on what we like. The reality is this Recon Squad is the closest thing we've ever had to Call of Duty actually giving a shit what we as the player base think of the game. And this is something that we should be jumping on the opportunity to push for what we want. Will they listen? That's the question that nobody can answer. Historically, probably not. But with Microsoft at the helm, who knows? This is not something that we've seen before. This is, and it is definitely not like playtesting and QAing, right? They're not asking you what bugs you come across. That's not what the company Fuel Cell talks about. That's not what they're interested in. That's not what they do. And that's definitely not what their blog post talks about. The reality is they are for the first time asking us as players, what is it that we want the game to be? And this is our opportunity to actually tell them in a way that their data scientists will understand. And that's why it's important to take a look at this and take it somewhat seriously.